This is the intriguingly named Camp Field area of central Leeds. Now a collection of car parks and offices alongside the towering Bridgewater Place. But what is the history of this district of the city and why the name? It suggests a military connection, but there was also an area of tightly packed housing at this location in the past, in the immediate vicinity of some of the biggest developments of the Industrial Revolution. In this video, using old maps, photographs and current clips, I will unravel the mystery of this almost forgotten area of Leeds. Camp Field is located to the south of Leeds city centre on the south bank of the River Aire. Close by, Victoria Bridge connects the area with Neville Street, which runs under the railway lines and alongside the Dark Arches up to City Square. As Camp Field lies within the Leeds South Bank regeneration area, there is currently a massive amount of development taking place around the district, including the preservation of many significant buildings, which link to the city's industrial past. However, if we were to go back 250 years, we would find a very different environment to the one we find today. At that time, just before Leeds' exponential growth, it was a landscape of water meadows and fields. Here, I have outlined Camp Field, which isn't identified on this map from 1775. The building at the corner of Camp Field is Camp Hall, which, as I researched, I wondered if it might be the reason for the name of the area. Maybe it was a field of Camp Hall. But in fact, it turned out that Camp Field earned its name in much more significant circumstances. In 1642, during the English Civil War, Leeds was garrisoned by Royalist troops commanded by Sir William Savile. In the January of 1643, Parliamentary forces, commanded by Sir Thomas Fairfax, decided on an attempt to capture the town. Forces attacked from the north and south, and 1,000 clubmen and 30 muskets camped in the area overnight prior to the Battle of Briggate. Camp Field has borne the name ever since. By 1815, Leeds was experiencing massive growth and the town was spreading out. In the bottom corner of this map, Camp Hall is still there, but now there is a group of buildings growing on the very edge of the Leeds township in Camp Field. These are mainly small rows of terraced houses that at first glance seem a little isolated. However, just over the town boundary in Holbeck, big developments have been taking place. John Marshall's mills are just a stone's throw away from Camp Field, and almost opposite the housing was Matthew Murray's workshop and foundry. The new housing would have been ideally placed for workers in the fast-paced growth of industry in the area, and that is perhaps one of the main reasons for their location. Within just a few years, any remaining space in South Leeds and Holbeck was taken up by factories, mills and housing. Victoria Bridge, built between 1837 and 1839, now connected communities north and south of the river, and new road and rail connections provided better transport links to the area. Camp Field became renowned for its cramped, tightly packed housing. Landlords made use of every available space, squeezing in further properties between buildings in courts such as this one, called Hamilton Court, which was accessed through a narrow arch between houses. The poor conditions rivalled those seen in other areas of the city, such as Quarry Hill. Hamilton Court is on the left-hand side of this map from 1889. You can see every available space is taken up with buildings, with just a few narrow passages and alleys allowing people to move around. The censuses are a fantastic resource to find out about the people living in Camp Field in the past. This one, from 1861, displays how people crowded into properties in the area. There were several pubs serving the residents of Camp Field, including the Grove Inn, listed on this page of the census. The occupations of inhabitants are also listed in the census, and a number are connected to iron foundries located nearby. The census also informs us of the birthplace of the residents, and it is possible to see how the growing city of Leeds was attracting migrants from further away. It is a similar story on this page of the census, from another of the courts on Camp Field, Foster's Court. Occupations once again indicate workers who have jobs in iron foundries. It is interesting to see that more than half of the residents have identified their birthplace in Ireland. Leeds attracted a high number of people of Irish descent looking for work and opportunities at this time, and large communities developed in parts of Leeds. Conditions in the accommodation were terrible, and at the end of the Victorian period, attempts were made to improve the area by removing some of the buildings. The courts between the terraces were taken down to leave 4 rows of mainly back-to-back properties. The cleared spaces were named Front Walk and Middle Walk. The changes meant more light and air could reach the remaining houses, although they remained surrounded by mills and factories. This photograph from 1917 shows Middle Walk after the improvements. Buildings that used to take up space in front of these houses have now been removed, though the old access ginnel to the yards and courts can be seen next to the property with the woman in the doorway. Bollards have been introduced to manage vehicles along the street. When this photograph was taken, many of the local men will have been away at war, and sadly, many men from the area never returned from the conflict. Despite these attempted improvements, the area continued to be cramped and overpopulated. This page from the 1901 census shows large families occupying houses on Front Walk. The range of occupations is varied, but the majority of them are low-skilled manual labouring jobs. The work will have been very hard, and people will have struggled to maintain a reasonable standard of living. The community of people from Ireland living in the area had grown during Victorian times, reflecting trends in other parts of the city. In 1896, the Roman Catholic Church of St Francis of Assisi was built, nearby on Manor Road, by celebrated architects Kelly and Birchall to meet the demands of worshippers in the area. In the late 1930s, the houses on Camp Field were reaching the end of their useful lives and were demolished. The cramped streets of terraced housing joined many described as slums and were subsequently pulled down. It was a similar process taking place across the city. The residents were forced to move elsewhere, and for a time very few people lived in this area which had once housed so many. St Francis of Assisi Church can be seen in the background of this photograph. It was an impressive structure which was sadly demolished in 1979 as clearances of housing in this part of South Leeds affected congregation numbers. The houses were cleared, leaving just the outline of the streets, although for a while the public houses remained alongside the factories and mills, and remarkably, one of the pubs still remains to this day. The Grove Inn can be seen at the bottom of Back Row to the right of this photograph. Somehow it has been able to withstand all the changes that have taken place around it, and it remains as popular as ever, offering new residents to the area, local workers and visitors alike a pleasant experience. It looked on as the old houses were demolished and their residents moved on. It has seen the changes that have continued to take place around it. The fact it remains can only be due to an element of chance and a good degree of determination by people not to let this link with the past disappear. By the 1950s, Victoria Works had taken over a large part of Campfield. The area was now almost completely given over to factories and mills. By the 1960s, the remaining section of Campfield was taken up as the factory expanded and took over more of its site. Sadly, even this was short-lived as deindustrialisation took its toll of the factories and industries of Campfield, Water Lane, Holbeck and Hunslet. New warehousing was introduced on Campfield in the 1990s, and further links with the past were lost. Much of the new building is quite nondescript in appearance, existing alongside large swathes of car parking. By 2007, the area was overshadowed by Bridgewater Place, which for a time was the tallest building in Yorkshire. The construction brought with it new jobs and people to the area, and new residents are once again living in this part of town. Massive developments are currently taking place in the area as the city moves forward and at the same time tries to come to terms with its heritage. Buildings which were once run down and neglected are now enjoying a new lease of life. Unfortunately, it seems likely that Campfield will be nothing more than a name on the map, but hopefully at some time its role in the history of the city and the hard work of the people who once lived here will be recognised by the new people moving in and living around Campfield.